So, I have to admit, I'm having some frustrations with Frank's bike. In the last video, it was running well enough that I was riding it around the neighborhood. It was cutting out when I was going uphill for some reason. The brakes didn't work and the turn signals didn't work, but it was running, and it seemed like it was running fine. But now, I spent a little bit of time. I got the front brakes sorted, I got the turn signals working, but now it won't run on both cylinders. The left cylinder here, for some reason, will not run. I still have spark. I've had the carbs off. I think this is the third or fourth time I've had the carbs off. I have good fuel flow from the petcock, and I cannot figure out for the life of me what is going on. So, I've got the carbs off again. I dipped them in the carb cleaner. I've been through them so many times. I am going to check the valves. The valves should not be off because it was running, 2 weeks ago, and I just can't imagine why else it isn't firing. But we're going to check the valves and put the carbs back together, put it all back together, and try one more time. Before I get into the running issues, I'll recap the brake and signal work. First, the brake lever arms are removed from their splined hubs. This can be a little tricky as they can be pretty tight, but with the pinch bolt loosened or removed, they can be persuaded off with some gentle wiggling and levering. To better access the rear lever arm, and since it was coming off anyway, I decided to drop the wheel next. So I loosened the nut, and then the pinch bolt on the other side. With the axle loose, I jacked up the front of the bike to unweight the front wheel. With the front wheel off the ground, the axle nut is removed, and the axle is drawn out with a screwdriver through the hole in the axle. With the axle out and the spacer out of the way, the wheel can be pushed to the side to give clearance to pull the brake assembly off, and the wheel can be maneuvered out as well. The brake is a twin leading shoe design. When the brakes are applied, the forward lever arm is pulled backwards, rotating an internal arm to press the leading edge of the bottom shoe into the wall of the drum. The rear lever arm is pushed forward along the cable by the cable housing, which rotates another internal arm, pushing the leading edge of the top shoe into the wall of the drum. There is a third spring hidden behind the bottom shoe, and that is attached to a bolt with a cam. This is used for adjusting the brake operation. The other thing to note, something I didn't realize initially, is that the two shoe springs aren't the same. The one for the front arm is heavier than the one for the rear. To take apart this brake, I'm going to try something a little bit half-assed and maybe a little bit dangerous. Hopefully it's going to be fine, but I'm going to use this turnbuckle and spin it. I don't have a good thing to grab the springs with to pull those off. But if I do this, I can open this up enough to take that out. I can at least clean and grease that. And then I'm hoping if I let this pressure back off, now maybe I can get this spring out. And then with that one out, maybe I can get that one out. I can't take this out the same way because it's attached to another little spring in there. So, I'm going to see if I can get this out now. Alright, let's see. That worked. Oh, excellent. I have to get the other side off. If that one will be as tough. After getting the lighter spring off, I was having some difficulty with the heavy one. I tried expanding the spring to slip washers between the coils, but the gaps weren't quite large enough, so I made a loop of wire and used a screwdriver as a lever and a vice grip to unhook it. With the springs out of the way, I could remove the cotter pins retaining the shoes and pull them off. All of the parts were thoroughly cleaned, the shoes were scuffed with sandpaper, and the pivot points lightly greased for reassembly. I tried to use the same wire loop and lever for reinstalling the heavy spring, but I couldn't quite get it there. So I switched tactics to install the lighter one first. With the internal arm pivot out, it wasn't too difficult. Then it was back to the heavier spring. With the brake hub in the wheel and the wheel back on the bike, it's time to make the brake adjustment. This is the bolt and locking nut that are attached to the cam on the inside. As it is rotated, it pushes the bottom brake shoe closer to the drum wall so it doesn't have as far to travel when brakes are applied. In hindsight, I realized there was probably a tool to do this in the toolkit on the bike, but I was using a vice grip to grab the square end of the nut and pushing the lever to help it turn. I was just looking for the point where the shoe makes contact, and then would be backing it out from there. I saw somewhere that there should be about 4 millimeters of movement in the arm when you apply the brakes, so that's what I was aiming for. The adjustment for the rear arm is at the cable and wants a similar amount of movement. When the brake lever is pulled, the two arms are pulled together and should apply equal force on both shoes. Moving on to the turn signal, I had noticed it blink on once or twice while test riding, but most of the time it wasn't working. It felt a bit loose, and if I pressed on it, it would come on, so it seemed to be just a matter of a poor ground, and hopefully tightening it up would do the trick. I just had to figure out how to do that, so it was off with the lens to investigate. What I found was an offset straight slot inside the handlebar behind the light socket. This was tightened, and after that, the signal worked. After the brakes and signal were taken care of, I wanted to go for another test drive. But as you saw at the beginning of the video, now it didn't want to work. It was difficult to start, and when it would, it was only running on the right cylinder. I was trying everything I could think of and redoing things I had already done. It felt like it had to be a fueling issue, but after going through the carbs again, checking the valve clearances, I checked compression, and I even checked timing one more time. I finally thought I had it figured out when I pushed on the plug cap and got the second cylinder to pick up, so new wires and caps were ordered and installed. I felt more and more certain I had solved it when I found a big crack in one of the old wires on its removal. And then the bike started with one kick. For the next day, and my next opportunity to test ride it, it lost power going up the hill again. Having previously replaced the wires and caps, I was disappointed that that didn't fix the issue, and I was still losing power when going up the hill. Today I came out and I was playing with the fuel lines and looking at fuel flow, and I observed some odd behavior in that this T was twisted slightly so it would favor the right side and not the left side. But when I unplugged the fuel lines on both sides and turned on the petcock, it was draining just to the one side, the far side. And I said, okay, so I put the fuel line back on the carb so that the needle valve would stop it, and turned it back on, assuming that once it stopped there, that then it would flow out of this side. And it did, but not as much as I'd like. And I found that if I twisted this either way, it would further disrupt the flow, and it would stop completely sometimes, which didn't make sense since the gas was still higher than the level of this. So I think there were a couple of things going on, but I put a clamp on here to keep this level. It doesn't look quite level in this picture, but it is now. And decided to add more gas and try again. And I thought I had it. I thought I had it because I was running up the hill and it made it almost all the way to the top before it died again. So after I got home, I was doing some more head scratching, and while I was sitting on the bike and talking to a neighbor, I started looking at the gas cap, and I started to think, I never did test the venting on the gas cap because I always assumed with the fuel level so low that it would take longer for vacuum to form and affect fuel flow. But I took the gas cap off and I made it up the hill. So I currently have a rubber glove covering it, which is kind of funny. I put it on there and fuel vapor started to inflate it. And I'm going to I tried a couple of things with the gas cap. I sprayed some kerosene inside the vent to see if it would come out through the air holes. It would not, which tells me, backs up the thought that it's clogged. So now I'm going to try and soak it in evaporust just in case small bits of rust are what's clogging those air passages. And I'm going to see what that does, what happens. And if that doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. But I think I've finally got Frank's bike running right. Thanks for watching.